Listening to Ken Hudnall. This is the Ken Hudnall Show. Coming to you from our studios right here in exciting El Paso, Texas. Gateway to the Old West and the most haunted city in the country. Well, we're now in our 12th season. 100 shows per season. And we're beginning that 12th season. Now we're going to be talking about all kinds of strange and unusual things. Besides Congress. You know, this is April 24th, 114th day of the year. Just 251 days remain to the year's over with. Holidays and observances. Help Animals Day. International Girls and ICT Day. That's Information and Communications Technology, don't you know? It's not a disease. Well, with some it is. New Kids on the Block Day. National Pig in a Blanket Day. National Teacher Child is Saved Day. World Day for Animals in Laboratories. Scream Day. It's, let's face it, self-care is important. Doesn't always mean candles and bubble baths and meditation and all that. Sometimes you need a catharsis, a good old-fashioned scream. National Take Our Daughters and Sons to Work Day. Firefly Day. Now that was a sci-fi that was enjoyable. It only lasted one season, but it had a cult following. It's remained popular for over 20 years. It's if you get a chance to look at it, I suggest doing it. National Bucket List Day and a National Day of Multilateralism and Diplomacy for Peace. Of Your Thighs Day. First day of summer in Iceland. Armenian Genocide Remembrance Day. Every Kid Healthy Week and American Quilter Society Week. All right. All that having been said, let's see what's in the news. Well, Alex Soros is fuming at left-wing climate group over their obsession with Palestine. The Sunrise Movement has got massive funding from the Soros-backed Democracy PAC and 1630 Fund in 2020. And Alex Soros is now chair of the Open Society Foundation. He's the son of George Soros. Took aim at a left-wing climate group and complained all they do is talk about Palestine. In an interview with New York Magazine in which he detailed his plan to fund efforts to foil the Trump administration's agenda, he expressed his frustration with this leftist environmentalist group, the Sunshine Movement, which gets the majority of its funding from Soros-backed organizations. Now Soros, who is Jewish, by the way, asked, what the hell did they do? We gave them money and now all they do is talk about Palestine. That's ridiculous. Looks to me like we got some folks who want to meddle in things that are really none of their business. Trump has told Putin to stop after Russia attacked Kiev with missiles. Resistance Democrats embrace combative, profanity-laced, dark woke rebrand fight Trump. Poster child seems to be Texas Representative Jasmine Crockett. She exemplifies a new confrontational approach as party members reject the respectability prison in their battle against MAGA Republicans. They're going to abandon civil politics in favor of provocative and combative dark woke. Now, the term dark woke refers to an online meme that gained popularity in January amid President Trump's inauguration. Under the dark woke tag, left-leaning ex-users share jokes and memes delighting in or wishing for the suffering of Trump supporters. The Some members of the Democratic Party are actually beginning to see benefits to the crass and rude attitude. The sad thing is, they don't get it. The American people repudiated their position, and yet they continue to try to put themselves out as the leaders. Well, Fetterman calls for bombing Iran's nuclear facilities. He says it's a diseased regime. Harvard's endowment now has $7 million per student. But they still get $550 million from the government annually. In 2017, they got $4.4 billion as a gift. Amid Harvard's battle with the Trump administration, it's already pulled billions of federal funding from the university and slowly taking even more. A fiscal watchdog called Open the Books decided to take a peek at how much money Harvard gets. Now, according to their research, Harvard collected more in federal grants and contracts than they stood to gain through tuition, room, and board for any given year. They also discovered that Harvard's $53.2 billion endowment's grown by $14 billion, or about $2 billion annually since 2018. As I said, they have more than $7 million per undergraduate student. That's ludicrous. And they have their hand out for more. Now, Chito Martinez, the only Belize native Major League Baseball player, just died at 59. His only Major League Baseball appearances came with the Orioles. President Trump has urged the Supreme Court to let the trans-military ban proceed. You know, quite frankly, people are going to do what people are going to do. But somehow think it's important to put it in the window that you're trans or bi or this or that is ludicrous. The Supreme Court has been asked to review a lower court's ruling that temporarily blocked the ban on transgender troops in the military. They've asked the Supreme Court to allow the military to disqualify from service individuals who have gender dysphoria or undergone medical interventions for gender dysphoria. In other words, boys want to be girls and girls want to be boys. Now, the New Jersey man is facing arson charges in connection to the Jones Road wildfire that has scorched 15,000 acres so far. It's 50% contained. Now, there is a protester who was dragged out of Trump Tower in handcuffs. He vandalized the president's 45 sign. It's in the lobby. Having lived in Trump Tower for several years, it's ridiculous to think you're accomplishing anything by vandalizing the home of many, many people. You don't like President Trump? Say so. But don't go vandalizing things with spray paint. All Americans are rushing to get their real ID 20 years after President Bush signed it into law. The San Jose, California Mayor, Matt Mahan, is saying what we're doing in homelessness in California is just not working. He proposed jailing vagrants who refuse to accept housing. According to the mayor, there's an extremely vulnerable subset of people who refuse these options. No matter how nicely designed they are, they'd prefer to live on the street. They'd prefer to beg. Well, Tommy Lauren, Michelle Tafoya, ripped Nike over their funding of puberty blocker study. I don't know what the fascination is about changing sexes. The poor deported man that the Democrats are having a meltdown over was pulled over driving a car belonging to a human smuggler. A confessed human smuggler, an illegal alien named Jose Ramon Hernandez Reyes. Democrats have been just losing their minds over this man. He's a criminal. He's here illegally. Take care of your constituents. Now, the Navy veteran who beat CNN in court has resumed his fight to clear his name. He's now sued U.S. News and World Report. Former Democratic Congressman Joe Crowley, who lost his seat to Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, or AOC, in the 2018 Democratic primary, questioned yesterday whether the progressive congresswoman would be able to appeal to moderates and Republicans as a national candidate. This silly woman is going to run for president. Well, Supreme Court Justice Gorsuch and Maryland School District lawyer have a wild exchange about a children's LGBT storybook. It covers bondage. Democrats, the Clintons, and the globalists are working together to censor Americans, all in the name of democracy. They don't think there should be free speech. It should be what they think it should be. J.D. Vance made a speech in Munich this year where he confronted the Europeans over their attacks on free speech. He said, if you're running in fear of your own voters, there's nothing we can do for you. But it appears there's something certain Americans can do for Europe. As the European Union ramps up its long-standing campaign against free speech, it's calling on Americans to make the case against both free speech and the United States. And who do they turn to? The Clintons. And the Democrats. Well, the police near Florida State University were stunned by an outpouring of support from FSU students after the deadly campus shooting. Florida State University student wanted to show her appreciation for the men and women in law enforcement who kept so many people safe. So she left them some cookies. Now, if she really wanted to get the attention of the police, she should have left donuts. And she left a lot of cookies. And she wasn't the only student. The Tallahassee Police Chief Lawrence Ravel said the outpouring of love from the community has been outstanding, but especially from the students. The minutes of him going on a shooting rampage, the suspected shooter, Phoenix Eichner, 20 years old, was shot by officers and taken into custody. While police were working to ensure the rest of the campus was safe, some students took it upon themselves to go to CVS and buy water. Several cases of it for the officers, and just brought them back, gave them to him. And he said since then we've had cookies and donuts. They know the way to a police officer's heart. Sandwiches, students have all brought over just to say thank you. It just means more when you know the people that you're doing it that were directly affected by the tragedy are doing something in return. Let's see what else we got. There's an Amazon book sale going on right now. I recommend you go to Amazon, to Kindle, look up Ken Hudnall, and buy 50 or 100 copies of my books. You can get them at 60% off print books, 80% off Kindle books. And I'll let that be what I'm going to say about that. Well, in a World War II shipwreck, divers found a vintage car, a 1941 Ford Super Deluxe. Was found on the wreck of the USS Yorktown in the Pacific Ocean. Yorktown was a Navy aircraft carrier, took part in a number of World War II operations. Japanese submarine sank the vessel in 1942 during the Battle of Midway. Now, the question I would have is, what is a car doing on the USS Yorktown? Multiple federal agencies end their link-in contracts over DEI. LinkedIn says that had nothing to do with it. It was shifting priorities. But in a survey conducted by Fox News, multiple federal agencies said they dropped millions of dollars in contracts for LinkedIn services over the businesses' social networks' embrace of diversity, equity, and inclusion. LinkedIn is boasted of being the world's largest professional network of over 1 billion users worldwide. It's been dropped by the Treasury Department, Interior, and Veterans Affairs. The more empty buildings being paid for with your taxpayer dollars are being discovered. Well, McDonald's is now going to sell McCrispy strips in orders of 3 or 4. It's a new permanent menu item. It's going to be available by May 5th. Though some outlets are beginning to offer it to customers today. It's a savory, sweet, and tangy creamy chili sauce. It's going to be added to it. It's the latest chicken offering the chain has rolled out. And try it before you claim it's foul. China's AI DeepSeek is facing a House probe over U.S. data harvesting and CCP propaganda. The company's privacy policy says it collects user data and stores it in secure servers located in People's Republic of China. My question would be, why? Well, Jay Leno's wife has dementia, but he says he's standing by his marriage vows, faces challenges, of course. Putin is planning on establishing an African naval base in Sudan because of its strategic location. It's a logical place to expand Russia's footprint into Africa, according to Kremlin experts. Fry Festival fraudster has announced a major career move amid a second act controversy. Billy McFarland has said that the Fry Festival deserves a team with the scale, experience, and infrastructure to realize its full potential. He spent several years in prison after failing to deliver what he promised would be a luxury music festival with big-name acts in the Bahamas. Ultimately defrauded 80 investors out of $24 million and scammed ticket holders and staff out of thousands of dollars when they showed up to a glorified campsite. Didn't have any entertainment at all. Well, a Russian stowaway snuck onto a Delta flight at New York airport. He's pled not guilty to a stowaway charge. There was an attack in Kashmir. India is vowing to hunt the terrorists and end of the earth as tensions with Pakistan rise. And they say all visas issued to Pakistani nationals will be revoked. The shooting in India's Kashmir region left 26 people dead. Well, since October 7th, there has been a lot of anti-Semitism that has come to light in various locations. A lot of it have been in schools, Ivy League schools. Trump says reciprocal tariffs are going to be reimposed within weeks. And back down on his 145% tariff on China, though he said he is open to a deal. He's a businessman, after all. New Jersey candidate Jack Ciatrelli invested in a Chinese company that bought 146,000 acres of U.S. farmland. And after years of being invested in Chinese efforts to obtain farmland, he's now going to run for governor of New Jersey, and he's pushing an anti-Chinese policy. Go figure. Well, Michelle Obama is revealing additional reasons why she skipped Trump's inauguration. She said it started with not having anything to wear. Now, this is a wear. Could buy anything she wants. She said, I had affirmatively, because I'm always prepared for any funeral or anything. I walk right around with the right dress. I travel with clothes just in case. But in this particular instance, didn't have anything to wear. Alrighty. We've been talking about strange things, the paranormal. Last couple of shows have been about what many people refer to as our haunted planet. You know, the Delaware Indians have a tradition that goes back as far as we can trace it, that a race of giants once inhabited the region east of the Mississippi. Had huge cities, massive fortifications. And another Indian lore, there are memorable references to giants. Let's not forget the biblical statement, there were giants in the earth in those days. That's Genesis chapter 6, verse 4. When I was down in South America, I heard a lot of stories about giants and long-forgotten civilizations. Some of those Panamanians, if you could get them to talk, they could tell you stories that would blow your mind. And bones of giants, some as high as 12 feet tall, have been found in the burial mounds of Minnesota and a number of other places in North America. So the evidence seems to support the idea that a race of giants did exist in earlier times. And some of the long abandoned stone constructions we have found may have been their handiwork. But of course, science doesn't believe in giants, so any evidence that supports that hypothesis has been relegated to the basements of the museums, or ignored or covered back up. There's also a lot of evidence that Christopher Columbus was I guess you could say, a late arrival in the New World. Evidence shows he was preceded by the Vikings, and there's even evidence of the ancient Phoenicians. In Mexico and California, we found artifacts from ancient China. In Massachusetts, there was a stone near Havener. In Massachusetts, dating back to the 14th century, is a carving left by a knight from the Orkney Islands. Near Havener in Oklahoma, there's a 12-foot high stone, 10 feet wide, 16 inches thick, covered with ancient Scandinavian runic symbols, discovered by the Choctaw Indians in 1830. And that's just one of a number of rune stones that have been discovered. Most famous, of course, was the Kensington stone, found near Kensington, Minnesota, at the turn of the last century. In recent years, there have been 2 more rune stones found in Oklahoma. The last one was found by 2 schoolboys near Pottal, Oklahoma in September of 1967. And it was usually archaeologists are insisting that they're hoaxes of some sort. Even though it would require an expert archaeologist and linguist to carry out such a hoax. Other scholars seem to think they might actually be authentic. "50 years before Queen Isabella financed Columbus's expedition, somebody drew a rough map of North America. A copy was discovered by Lawrence Whitten, a rare book dealer from New Haven, Connecticut in 1957. It's now part of the rare document collection at the Beck Library of Yale University, assuming the pro-Palestinians haven't burned it. It's known as the Yale-Vinland map. Investigators have dated it to 1440 AD. And as usual, the experts have been arguing about whether it's real or not ever since. Some claim it's an out-and-out hoax. Others regard it as further evidence the Vikings were frequent visitors to the New World. More substantial evidence has been found in the form of ruins of a Viking longhouse on the Ungava Peninsula in northern Canada. A team from Laval University dated those ruins to between the 11th and 12th centuries. Numerous other ruins and artifacts have been found all over North America. 2 remarkably similar axes, both of medieval European origin, have been discovered in Bidmore, Ontario, and Rocky Nook Point, Massachusetts. Archaeologists from the Smithsonian Institute uncovered a small slab of stone covered with some kind of ciphers in 1885 near Back Creek, Tennessee. They said it was the work of Cherokee Indians. Cherokee said it wasn't, but that doesn't make any difference when the experts speak. Modern specialists such as Dr. Joseph Mahan, who I knew in my misspent youth from the Museum of Arts and Crafts in Columbus, Georgia, taking a second look at it and came up with a completely different theory. Dr. Mahan knows Cherokee, and he persuaded the Smithsonian to re-examine the Back Creek stone. He says you can't ignore evidence just because it doesn't fit in the current theory, and he's right. Similar stone was found by Manfred Metcalf at Fort Benning, Georgia. in 1968. He was trying to dig up stones to build a barbecue grill in his backyard when he found this peculiar stone. 9 inches square, covered in triangles, circles, straight and wavy lines. And he passed it on to Dr. Mahan. But the markings appeared to be characteristically Mediterranean. The other scientist was named Dr. Cyrus Gordon, who was chairman of the Mediterranean Studies at Brandeis University, agreed with him. There are strong similarities between the Metcalfe stone and samples of Minoan writing dating back 3,000 years to the Bronze Age civilization that flourished on the Mediterranean island of Crete between 3000 and 1100 BC. Dr. Gordon became the center of a controversy a few years ago when he announced a sample of Phoenician writing found on a stone in Brazil was authentic, even though other archaeologists announced it as a fraud. So you're always safe to claim it's a fraud. You're never safe to claim something is real. I mean, as one of them said, how possible is it ancient Phoenicians visited Brazil? Now let's get back to the Bat Creek stone for a minute. Dr. Gordon thinks it might have been the handiwork of Hebrews from Palestine during the Bronze Age. Both scientists speculate that ancient Semitic tribes from the Middle East may have actually visited North America thousands of years ago. That brings back up the stories of that we've all heard about the lost tribes of Israel. Could they have somehow found their way to this continent, become the lost American culture described in the Mormon Bible? Well, Dr. Mahan, for his part, believed that some Indian tribes can be traced back to seafaring Mediterranean people. The Yuchi are racially and linguistically different from other North American tribes. And according to their legends, we came as the sun came and we went as the sun went. It's believed they came from the east, crossed the Atlantic Ocean, and moved northwards from Florida into Georgia. And that may well have been a mistake going to Georgia. Some archaeologists tend to lump runestones together with stones bearing Indian petroglyphs. Now, of course, petroglyphs are designs carved into rocks as path markers, and thousands have been found all over the Americas. I found a lot of them above Fort San Lorenzo in Panama. Nobody had ever been able to explain who did it or what they were saying. Although innumerable isolated Indian tribes are obviously responsible for them, a lot of interesting similarities in the symbols used. Some of the same symbols have been found carved on other ancient rocks in other parts of the world, suggest that this form of writing was universal at one time. Even though the races and tribes responsible couldn't understand each other's language, in most cases had little or no contact. But it must be noted that runic writing is quite different from Indian petroglyphs. The rune stones carry alphabetic symbols. Petroglyphs bear picture writing, somewhat related to Egyptian hieroglyphics. Turning for a moment to the Kensington stone that I mentioned that was found near the town of Kensington, Minnesota. When translated, described how 8 Goths and 22 Norwegians established a camp. A group went fishing. When they came back, they found the 10 who remained behind, red with blood and dead. The year was given as 1362. Indian petroglyphs, on the other hand, are customarily devoted to trail information, where to find water and things like that. One Indian pictograph of particular interest is a complex design that's been found throughout North, Central, and South America. It depicts a series of squares inside one another. Hopi Indians call this the Mother Earth symbol. To the Pimas, that same symbol is the House of Tehu. To the Kunas in Panama, it's a Tree of Life. Anthropologist Harold Sterling Gladwin saw something else in it when he studied that symbol carved on the wall of Casa Grande, Arizona. He wrote a book called Men Out of Asia, and in it he noted the Mother Earth symbol is identical to the Minoan labyrinth depicted on coins from Knossos, Crete, dating to about 200 BC. Famous labyrinths were said to have been built by Daedalus to hide the half-man, half-bull Minotaur. Dr. Gladwin and Dr. Clyde Keeler in Millersville, Georgia, both seem to think the Indians used the ancient labyrinth symbol as evidence of the influence of the early Minoan culture. The early 1960s, Angelos Dianopoulos, a Greek scientist, proposed another theory that had to do with Atlantis. He suggested the sunken Minoan cities of Crete might have supplied the basis for the Atlantis legends. According to his theory, Plato just got the dates wrong. Atlantis may have disappeared only 1,000 or so years before the historian heard the tale, not 9,000 years, as Plato said. Might have been one of the Greek islands, maybe Thera. Divers and archaeologists working in the waters there some years ago discovered all kinds of evidence indicating the Minoan culture came to a very abrupt end. So abrupt, craftsmen left their tools next to unfinished works and ran. Explanation currently in vogue is a sudden volcanic eruption destroyed the islands. Dr. Gallinopoulos has been partially successful in matching Plato's description of Atlantis, what's now known as Thera. Dr. Bruce Heezen, oceanographer, believes the eruption occurred about 1400 BC. Of course, other scientists, if you will, dispute this date. Now, we do know that early Crete was a center of an impressive culture. Great cities and temples built there. It's a major naval power. But it wasn't likely that Crete and Thera could have lived up to Plato's description of the super civilization he called Atlantis. And we got all that perplexing evidence of the rune stones and other artifacts scattered around this continent, which demonstrate that men from Europe and possibly from Crete and Thera did in fact visit American pre-Columbian times. It's even possible the group settled here and built forts and temples, and the remnants of which have served to augment the beliefs of dozens of cults and fringe societies. In a dissertation about petroglyphs published by the Smithsonian in 1937, Julian Stewart found on the argument that attempt to prove that the Egyptians, Scythians, Chinese, and a host of other old world peoples, including the 10 lost tribes of Israel, invaded America in ancient days. He said the evidence is just not there. 1967, the Smithsonian is changing its tune. They stopped blaming the Indians for everything that's been found. The Indians have been saying, we didn't do it all along. According to Phil Thornburg, a petroglyph expert in Victoria, Columbia, when the white men first arrived here in British Columbia, 1860, the West Coast Indians had already incorporated the carvings into their legends. They showed them to the white explorers and explained they were left by an ancient civilization were actually the hub of creation. In fact, Thornburg pointed out what appeared to be the carving of a Chinese dragon. Yes, that's part of Indian legends. They're known as Situto. Says there does seem to be an oriental background to them, but being carved in sandstone, it's virtually impossible to say what age they are. He found some buried under more than a foot of topsoil, which means they had to be ancient. Now, this wasn't the type of topsoil that would have washed over them. This was formed there, placed in the age of the carvings 5,000 to 7,000 years ago, which for North America is ancient. He found one petroglyph on Vancouver Island that had a hole worn completely through it by dripping water. That's proof it was there for a very long time. And in another site, he found a carving that had crumbled when a massive tree grew straight up through it. Well, petroglyphs are definitely the work of Indian tribes, often telling stories about hunts and battles, and several instances encounters with the little people and other phantom inhabitants. Some contained warnings that the valley and mountain ahead is the abode of the phantoms. Cherokee Indians have legends about the strange entities who reside around Chimney Rock in North Carolina. Europeans have also seen them occasionally. 1806, the Reverend George Newton wrote in the Raleigh Register a very extraordinary vision of thousands of beings in the air. They possessed a glittering appearance resembling the human form and were seen on or about Chimney Rock on the 31st of July last year. Researcher Angelo Caparello found his testimony by Mrs. Reeves, one of the alleged witnesses. She said, "I looked toward the chimney. I was absolutely amazed, for south of Chimney Rock and floating along the side of the mountain was a huge cloud of white, phantom-like beings. Their clothing, and filmy as it looked, you could only call it clothing, was so brilliant a white it almost hurt the eye to look at it. Although I felt weak somehow, it left a solemn and pleasing impression on my mind. And Chimney Rock is only one of a countless number of haunted places on this planet." Well, in discussing some of these ancient locations, we have to use the word vitrify. That's a $10 word meaning to change into glass. It's made by heating sand or various oxides of silicon, boron, phosphorus, and other materials and cooling it. And you do it very rapidly so you prevent crystallization. Now, this process is simple. Men have been manufacturing glass for thousands of years, but when the first atomic bomb was exploded in New Mexico in 1945, not only left a big hole in the ground, but a tremendous heat melted the sand and fused it together in glass-like fragments. These scorched particles were identical to objects known as tektites. And tektites have been found all over this planet and have baffled science for years. One recent expedition found tektites scattered over an area 6,000 by 4,000 miles from Tasmania to the north of the Philippines, and from the East Indies to the east coast of Africa. And these tektites were analyzed being about 700,000 years old. You can see a number of samples at the Museum of Natural History in New York. Now, like nature, science abhors a vacuum. So most books on mineralogy, without any support, assert that tektites are actually the result of meteoric origin. And it's a great theory, and everybody seems to believe it, but the majority of all meteorites are made of solid iron, and most are vaporized by the heat of friction when they enter the atmosphere. Substances capable of melting in the glass would therefore burn up before they hit the surface of the Earth. So in 1969, not to be outdone, a group of NASA scientists came up with a new version of the meteorite theory. They said that tektites came from the moon. They said eons ago, a huge meteor plummeted into the moon, striking with such force its impact hurled tons of moon dust into the air. This little material attained escape velocity and passed into an orbit around the Earth, where it gradually was sucked downward by gravity, entered the Earth's atmosphere, melted, and fell into the Pacific Ocean. So, mystery solved. Unless you happen to have an 8th grade education, a slide rule, and the basic knowledge of the mechanics involved. In that case, you'd find the impacting meteor would have to be of enormous size and be traveling at fantastic velocity in order to accomplish the first step, casting debris beyond the moon's gravity. Now, such a meteor would, in all probability, affect the moon in other discernible ways, such as perhaps even changing its orbit. Then a long series of spectacular coincidences would be necessary for the debris to enter the proper orbit at the proper time, so it would lapse into a retrograde orbit around the Earth. And finally, since tons of tektites are scattered in paths across the Pacific floor, so we should know that less than 5% of mass covering the Earth's atmosphere is likely to survive and hit the surface, the quantity of lunar material necessary to produce these tektites would have been larger than the original impacting meteor. Now, hunks of glass have in fact fallen from the sky. In fact, since ancient times, all kinds of junk has been dropping down on us, ranging from stone pillars and metal wheels to huge blocks of ice and vast quantities of real blood and even raw meat. Science conveniently ignores everything but the iron lumps, which they assume are pieces of old planets drifted around in space. And to astronomy's credit, we do know there are groups of this debris in the Earth's orbit around the sun and predict annual meteor showers that occur as we pass through this mess. Now, one chunk of glass and metal crashed into a driveway in Connifton, Ontario, September 1968. Wesley Reed looked at it and saw it was too hot to handle. After it cooled down, he found he had a brownish object weighing about 12 ounces. When experts, I use that term loosely, tested it, they found it was made of glass laced with small quantities of pure zinc. Whatever it was didn't happen to be part of a man-made satellite, which generally doesn't contain much glass anyway, and it definitely fell out of the sky. Well, Earth's phantoms inhabitants are always dumping their garbage on us. Flying saucer enthusiasts have been collecting and analyzing this stuff for years and found pieces of pure aluminum, magnesium, tin, copper, slag, and endless varieties of silicon. Unfortunately for them, none of this aerial debris seems to support their contention UFOs and motherships from another planet. There was any known meteorite strewn such material or tektites in its path. Discovery of tektites and vitrified stones in the ancient ruins of Baalbek has inspired another popular UFO-related theory. Baalbek once served as a spaceport for rocket ships from another world. A Soviet ethnologist, Professor Agrist, proposed the theory in an article on Moscow's Letonaya Gazeta in 1959. He suggested Sodom and Gomorrah were destroyed by an atomic bomb. He also suggested Lot's wife didn't turn into a pillar of salt, but was actually reduced to a pillar of ashes when she ignored a warning not to linger behind Lot's fleeing party. Now, Baalbek is located in Lebanon, east of Beirut, north of Damascus, Syria. Ancient time, it was a thriving city filled with a great temple dedicated to Baal, the sun god. The pillars and stone slabs, some weighing several tons, still standing, are impressive and no more impressive than the scores of other similar ruins scattered throughout the Middle East. Enormous ruins of this type can be found deep in the heart of inhospitable deserts, raising once again the question of how the ancient people managed to quarry, transport, and erect these monuments, using the crude tools and minimum mechanical aids that we're sure that they had. But they did manage to do it, and they managed quite well. In 1948, an expedition from the University of Chicago unearthed the remnants of an ancient village 30 miles east of Kirkuk, Iraq. Dr. Robert Braidwood estimated the village had been settled some 8,000 years ago. In comparison, Baalbek's a modern city. Professor Egger's theories were a bombshell to these sort of cults, particularly the flying saucer folks. He regarded the presence of tektites as evidence that atomic-powered rockets were once used in those days and used the vast stone platforms at Baalbek as launching areas. Apparently, he didn't know that vitrified ruins are a common phenomenon all over the world. Forts and towers so old, there are not even legends about them. Can be found throughout northern Europe, the British Isles, and the walls of many of these are vitrified. At some point in the distant past, these structures must have been subjected to tremendous heat, though not necessarily the blast of some nuclear-powered rocket. Lightning is the explanation most frequently offered by science. There's no evidence to indicate that lightning bolts can vitrify stone or even sand, although we know very little bit about lightning and its effects. It would take dozens of lightning bolts all striking the same spot to produce these vitrified monuments. In some parts of the world, such as the area of 18,000 square yards outside of Cuzco, Peru, whole hillsides have been vitrified. Theories of volcanic activity and glacial movements have been offered to account for these, but in actuality, none of these theories really work. Legends describing how the planet was once bathed in fire, maybe more than once. So vitrification could be the product of some nearly forgotten natural catastrophe. When in doubt, always come up with a natural theory. It can't be disproven. October 8th, 1871, a gigantic fireball or meteor roared over the Midwest, caused a rash of disastrous fires in a number of states, including the famous Chicago fire. Apparently, Mrs. O'Leary's cow kicking over a lantern did not start the Chicago fire. Thousands of people were killed in Illinois and Wisconsin, and vast areas were ravaged by flames that night. So a similar visitor from space could, in fact, have caused the vitrifications. Those strange phenomena could be to blame. From time to time, overpowering waves of heat from an unknown source are concentrated in specific areas. Figueira, Portugal, suffered one of these mysterious blasts of heat for 2 minutes, July 6, 1949. Temperature roared to 158 degrees. Hundreds of people collapsed in the street. Thousands of chickens and ducks keeled over dead. The Mondego River dried up suddenly in several places, killed thousands of fish. We don't understand this phenomenon at all, and it's possible that even more intense heat waves of this type have occurred in the past. Fathers of Agris weren't about to accept such mundane explanations for the vitrification of Baalbek, though. An astronomer named Dr. Carl Sagan, who you probably heard of, presented a paper before the American Rocket Society November 15, 1962. In it, he repeated Professor Agris' speculations, urged that ancient myths and legends be re-examined for possible clues to an early visit by extraterrestrial civilizations. Other researchers scoured the ancient records of India and found things such as the Mahabharata document dating back more than 3,000 years. It talked about brazen missiles that hurtled out of the sky into the midst of an attacking army, producing a radiance of smokeless fire. It flattened chariots, ignited forests, boiled rivers, and produced dark clouds of death. This all sounds uneasily like an atomic attack, don't you know? In the Masuba Parva, another ancient historical account, there's a vivid description of some kind of death-dealing ray that began as a small bright glow, blew into a shaft of brilliant light, and consumed its target. This phenomenon was accompanied by violent winds and peals of thunder and cloudless skies and earth tremors. Then we got Rakshasas, shaped like huge mounds, that attacked another Indian army from the sky and fired weapons winged with gold, thunderbolts, and hundreds of fiery wheels. Well, even in the Bible, we're told how the prophet Elijah was saved by balls of fire that wiped out 100 soldiers and their captains. That's in 2 Kings chapter 1. That would have been about 896 BC. There are innumerable stories of this type from all cultures indicating that wings over the world is armed with spectacularly advanced weapons and doesn't hesitate to use them against mortal man. So one conclusion about the vitrified forts is they were attacked by flying saucers that focused deadly heat rays on them and their occupants. But the entire desert between Damascus and Baghdad is littered with blackened rocks. Thousands of square miles seem to be charred, not by the sun, but by some long-forgotten Holocaust. So you have to ask at this point, if you subscribe to the Wings Over the World theory, did the Wings Over the World organization lay waste to Mesopotamia? Or did some horrible natural disaster wipe out the great civilization that once thrived there? Well, turning from Mesopotamia, 4,000 years ago, at least, Great Britain was populated by a small group of people barely out of the Stone Age. They had a few primitive tools made out of bone, and they eked out a living with only the greatest difficulty. And anthropologists estimate there were maybe 300,000 of them. And that 300,000 were divided into warring clans and factions, since factionalism seems to be the natural state of man. But somehow, some way, this 300,000 group managed to get together and spend many generations quarrying huge stones, some of which weighed as much as 30 tons, in the Preseli Mountains of Wales, and hauled those enormous blocks of stone 240 miles to Amesbury. And there they systematically arranged these stones in a circle Following measurements so precise, they're able to construct a mathematically correct astronomical computer. I'm talking about Stonehenge. It's there. It's been there since before man can remember. And is built during a time when the population of Great Britain wasn't more than 300,000 people. Like the Great Pyramid, Stonehenge seems to have been a pointless and impossible exercise. Thousands of workers had to be fed and clothed and housed for generations as they labored on that profitless project. And it would require top-flight administrative talent to plan and organize the work and supervise its execution. Architects had to design the monument with care before the first stone was chipped out of the hillside. Above all, archaeologists want folks to believe that these early primitives had the motivation necessary to dedicate themselves to such an enormous task for generation after generation. And we're asked to believe they pushed and hauled these monstrous stones up and down hills, across rivers and through forests and bogs on sledges and wooden rollers. And then somehow, arriving at Amesbury, they managed to stand the slabs on end, then lift other massive stones on top of those, and build the whole thing so securely it would last for 4,000 years. I don't know about you, but I found the very concept absurd. There's a book you might check out if you have an interest in Stonehenge. And until you can lay eyes on it, you don't understand what you're dealing with. But in his book, Stonehenge Decoded, Gerald Hawkins catalogs the absurdities and offers the educated estimate the construction of Stonehenge required at least 1.5 million man-days of physical labor. By his calculations, it took over 3 centuries to build it. That's at least 10 generations. 10 generations of primitive people whose natural state of mind have been fighting with each other were somehow convinced that it was worthwhile to arrange a whole bunch of giant stones in a circle on an English plain. As he observed, for generations, the work on Salisbury Plain must have absorbed most of the energies, physical, mental, and spiritual, and most of the material resources of an entire people. Of course, there are those that believe that the early Britons didn't build Stonehenge at all. Oh no, it was the Atlanteans or the people from outer space or some other paranormal force. Well, at that point, we've run out of time. We'll be talking more about some of the mysteries of this baffling planet. Until then, this is Ken Hudnall for the Ken Hudnall Show saying have a truly great evening, and don't forget, if you want a cheesecake that'll blow your mind, go to Cheesecake Outlet, 404 Arizona in El Paso, and tell them that Ken sent you. Until tomorrow, y'all have a great evening.